Hey guys, welcome back to The Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is Pro-Revenge Story. In 2023, my high school required everyone in years 10, 11 to take a technology subject. I chose engineering because it sounded more interesting than home economics or textiles. When I walked into the classroom on the first day, I immediately noticed I was the only girl in a class of 22 students. Being stuck in that situation for 2 years seemed like absolute torture. Maybe I should switch classes, I told the head of year the next day. Please consider staying, he replied. The only other female student from the parallel class just dropped out for the same reason. We need you to help meet our diversity requirements. I decided to stay, partly because I genuinely enjoyed the subject. That's when I discovered that Trevor, this guy who'd been harassing my sisters and me since middle school, was in my class. I never understood his vendetta against us. Girls shouldn't be in engineering, he'd sneer whenever I walked in. This class is designed for males because they're naturally better at it. Just ignore him, my friend Matt would tell me. He's just intimidated because you're smarter than him. Trevor would block the doorway some days, forcing me to squeeze past while making crude comments. Oops, didn't see you there, he'd say with a smirk. Maybe if you were built like an engineer, I would have noticed you. The constant sexism was annoying but manageable. I didn't report it to teachers because I didn't want to be labeled a tattletale. The real problems started when my practical work began disappearing. Nearly half of my projects over those 2 years mysteriously vanished. I knew Trevor was behind it, but couldn't prove anything. The situation became critical halfway through senior year when we started our final project, a mini handheld vice. It was complex, requiring 7 precisely machined components to function properly. I knew I'd need to make multiple attempts to get it right. Hey, how does Trevor always finish his work? Matt asked one day. He spends more time harassing you than actually working. After class, I investigated the communal storage box where we kept our projects, each wrapped in tape with our names. That's when I discovered why my work kept vanishing. Trevor had been stealing my pieces and submitting them as his own since day one. You won't believe what I just found out, I told Matt during lunch. That jerk's been taking credit for my work this whole time. We need to catch him in the act, Matt suggested, but I had a better idea. The final project required us to mark our work with metal letter stamps on the last day. We couldn't do it earlier because the indentation would ruin the finish. Trevor always showed off by hitting the stamps as hard as possible with the hammer. While searching through the supply room with Matt, we discovered some brittle metal that looked similar to steel but shattered easily. Matt accidentally dropped a piece, and it broke cleanly in half. This is perfect, I said, picking up the fragments. I carefully crafted duplicate vice components using this brittle metal. It was challenging, the material would crack in the lathe, so I had to use new drill bits and wrap everything in masking tape to prevent shattering. The result looked slightly darker than regular steel, but I doubted Trevor would notice since he hadn't made any of it himself. On the final day, Trevor strutted up to the anvil with his hammer. Watch this, he boasted to his friends. Crack! The main components shattered into pieces. Trevor's face turned red as he repeatedly smashed the fragments, reducing them to powder while cursing loudly. I believe that's a 0, Trevor, our teacher said firmly. Matt and I tried suppressing our laughter as we stamped our own projects. Trevor was still demanding a replacement as we left the workshop. He failed the entire course while I received the highest grade and won the school's Engineering Excellence Award. Now, in 2025, I'm finishing my second year of engineering at university, and I haven't seen Trevor since graduation. The next one is an entitled people story. I never thought I'd be fighting for my right to live in peace at age 45, but here I am. 3 years ago, I bought my dream property. A beautiful 5-acre wooded lot with a custom-built cabin about 30 minutes outside the city where my company is headquartered. I needed this retreat after spending 15 years building my tech company from the ground up. The stress of being CEO was wearing me down, and this place was my sanctuary. The property sits at the edge of a development called Pine Ridge Estates. When I bought it, the real estate agent assured me that while there was an HOA for the main neighborhood, my parcel was specifically excluded since it was larger and set apart from the main development. I had the paperwork to prove it, which turned out to be crucial later. For the first 2 years, everything was perfect. I'd spend weekdays at my downtown condo near the office and retreat to my forest haven on weekends. I kept to myself, maintained my property meticulously, and barely interacted with the handful of neighbors whose properties bordered mine. The only improvement I made was adding a small workshop where I could tinker with electronics and woodworking projects to decompress. Then last year, everything changed when a new HOA board was elected. The new president, a woman I'll call Margaret, was the type who seemed to live for the power trip of enforcing rules. I first met her when she showed up unannounced one Saturday morning while I was having coffee on my deck. "Good morning," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm Margaret, the new president of Pine Ridge Estates HOA. I'm just introducing myself to all residents and reminding everyone about our upcoming community meeting." "Nice to meet you," I replied, "but I'm not actually part of the HOA. My property is outside the boundaries." Her smile disappeared instantly. "That's not possible. All properties in this area are part of our association." I tried to explain politely, but she wasn't having it. "Well, there's been a mistake then. I'll need to see your paperwork. We'll be addressing this at the next meeting." I showed her my deed and the explicit exclusion clause, thinking that would end it. Instead, she just huffed and said she'd look into it before marching off my property. A week later, I received an official-looking letter in my mailbox. It was from the HOA stating that my property was in violation of several bylaws: unauthorized structure, my workshop, failure to pay dues for 3 years, over $3,000 with late fees, and business activities prohibited in a residential area. That last part confused me until I read further. Apparently someone had Googled me and discovered I was a CEO. The letter claimed that because I occasionally took work calls from my deck and had my company laptop with me, I was conducting business on the property, which violated HOA rules. The demands were ridiculous. Remove my workshop, pay all back dues with penalties, and either resign from my position as CEO or sell my property within 60 days. I called my lawyer immediately, who confirmed what I already knew. They had no jurisdiction over my property. He suggested sending a cease and desist letter, which we did that same day. Instead of backing down, things escalated. The next weekend, I arrived to find that someone had placed violation stickers on my workshop doors and mailbox. When I removed them, Margaret appeared as if by magic, phone in hand. "You're destroying HOA property now," she said, recording me. "That's another fine." "Margaret, we've been through this. My property is not under HOA jurisdiction. Please stop harassing me or I'll have to take legal action." "We'll see about that," she snapped. "The board has unanimously voted to incorporate your parcel into our boundaries. It's an eyesore having a non-compliant property in our community." "That's not how this works," I told her. "You can't just vote to take control of my property." "Actually, we can. It's in our charter. And since you're violating our business prohibition by working from home, you need to either quit your job or move out." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "I'm not quitting my job of 15 years because you misunderstand property law." She gestured toward my workshop. "That thing needs to go, regardless. It's unsightly and not approved by the architectural committee." "There is no regardless, Margaret. You have no authority here." She left with a threat that I'd be hearing from their lawyer. Sure enough, 3 days later, I was served with a lawsuit claiming my property was incorporated into the HOA through some obscure provision in county zoning regulations and demanding compliance with all their rules. My lawyer was actually excited when I called him. "This is textbook harassment and abusive process," he said. "We're going to countersue." What followed was 6 months of legal back and forth. During this time, the harassment continued. HOA members would park at the edge of my property and take photos. They'd stop me in the driveway to remind me of violations. One day I found my gate padlocked with an HOA lock, which my lawyer documented before having a locksmith remove it. The worst incident happened when I was hosting a small company retreat, just my 5-person executive team for a strategy weekend. We were having lunch outside when Margaret and 2 other board members walked onto my property, interrupting our meeting. "This is exactly what we're talking about," she announced loudly. "Commercial activity in a residential zone. We're filing a complaint with the county." My COO, who had been with me since the beginning, stood up calmly. "Ma'am, you're trespassing on private property. Please leave immediately." "We have every right to be here as HOA representatives," one of the men with her insisted. I'd had enough. "Leave now or I'm calling the sheriff for trespassing." They refused, so I made the call. When the sheriff's deputy arrived, Margaret tried to convince him that they had authority as HOA representatives to enter any property in their jurisdiction for inspection purposes. The deputy wasn't buying it. "Ma'am, I've seen the property records. This parcel is not part of your HOA. You need to leave now or I'll have to take you in for criminal trespass." They finally left, but not before Margaret shouted that I'd regret this. Our case finally went before a judge 3 months later. The HOA lawyer tried to argue that because my property benefited from the community atmosphere created by the HOA, I should be subject to their rules regardless of the legal boundaries. The judge was unimpressed. "Counselor, are you suggesting that proximity to an HOA automatically subjects one to its governance regardless of deeds, contracts, or consent?" Their lawyer stammered something about community standards and property values, but the judge cut him off. I've reviewed the documents. This property was explicitly excluded from the HOA jurisdiction in the original development plan. The plaintiff has no authority to retroactively incorporate it without the owner's consent. He dismissed their lawsuit and granted our countersuit for harassment. The HOA was ordered to pay my legal fees, which had reached nearly $30,000, and damages of $75,000. Additionally, he issued a permanent injunction prohibiting any HOA member from entering my property without written permission. The best part came 2 weeks later when I received a letter from the county. In response to our complaint, they had audited the HOA finances and found several irregularities. The board was being investigated for misappropriation of funds, and Margaret had been removed as president pending the outcome. I later learned from a friendly neighbor that Margaret had been using HOA funds to pay for personal landscaping and had convinced the board to target me because she wanted to buy my property for her son at below market value. Apparently, she thought she could harass me into selling. Instead of selling, I doubled down. I expanded my workshop with proper county permits, built a beautiful deck overlooking the forest, and started spending 3-day weekends at my retreat instead of just 2. I installed a state-of-the-art security system with cameras covering every inch of my property line. The new HOA board sent me a formal apology and has kept their distance. They even offered me a settlement above what the court ordered if I would sign an agreement not to pursue further action. I accepted, using the money to build a small guest cabin where my executive team can stay during our now quarterly strategy retreats. I still run my company, which has grown even more successful. The irony is that the publicity from the case, which made local business news, actually brought us new clients who appreciated our stand against overreach. As for Margaret, I heard she moved to a condo in the city after selling her house. I almost feel sorry for her new neighbors. Almost. The lesson I learned is that some people simply cannot tolerate others living by different rules, even when those rules don't affect them at all. My peaceful forest retreat remains my sanctuary, and no HOA will ever change that. Sometimes standing your ground is the only option, especially when you have the law on your side. I refused to quit my job or give up my property rights, and in the end, justice prevailed. I'm just grateful I had the resources to fight back. Not everyone is so fortunate when facing HOA overreach. The next one is a malicious compliance story. Some many years ago, I worked customer service for a company that managed a Medicare Part D drug plans, and the annual enrollment period rolled around, and during that time, it got chaotic. On top of the usual caring for customers, answering their questions, fixing problems, we had to enroll people into our plans. And it was a bit of a process. There were questions that needed to be asked and answered, information that had to be imparted, and at the end of it all, a long spiel explaining our responsibilities and the customer's responsibilities and important information the customer had to verbally consent to. So in the midst of this, I get a woman who is angry she has to do this, and is angry at how much time the whole process is taking. I explain to her I am trying to get her through this all as quickly as possible. Then we get to the end, and I explain that I have to read her the terms of service, and I need her to verbally confirm yes to it all. Immediately, she starts carrying on how she just doesn't have the time to listen to it. I tell her I am legally required to read this to her. She doesn't want to hear it, just sign her up. I explain again that to complete the sign-up process, I have to read this to her, and she needs to acknowledge it. Another round of she doesn't want to hear it, doesn't want to agree to it, I can just skip it and sign her up. No, I can't. I can read through it quickly, however she still needs to hear it and say yes. More arguing she doesn't want to, let's just say she agrees to it and I can sign her up. By this time I'm thinking, lady, if you had just let me read this, instead of arguing with me, we could have been done by now, which I couldn't say. Instead, I inform her that I have to read this agreement to her and she needs to verbally agree to it. If she doesn't, I will not be able to sign her up for Medicare Part D. She will not have a Part D plan. She will not be able to enroll in a plan until the next year's enrollment period, and she will have to pay a fine for not having a plan this year. She ignores all that, tells me to sign her up, and hangs up. Of course, I don't sign her up. And I write down the whole incident in the call log, that I explained several times that I needed to go over the agreement and get her consent, the penalties to her if she didn't, that she refused, and that I did not sign her up. Several weeks after the new year, a coworker sitting near me gets a call from a woman who is furious that when she went to get a prescription filled, the pharmacy wasn't able to run the insurance on it, and when they checked that she didn't have a Part D drug plan. The coworker asked for the woman's name, which was the woman who I didn't sign up. My coworker checked and said the caller did not have a plan with us. Worse for the caller, we could not enroll her since she had missed the enrollment period. Imagine how much easier things would have gone for everyone if that woman had just let me do my job and read the service agreement and she just said yes to it. The next one is an entitled people story. I, 22F, was on a flight home with my friend, 21F. When we landed at Detroit Airport, there were a lot of issues and they kept moving us to different gates because of storms that diverted other planes and flooding. We had a connection and had no idea where we were in relation to the gate we needed to go to. It wasn't a big deal at first since our connection didn't leave for another hour, but with all the trouble, our connection was about to leave in 15 minutes when we were finally being deboarded. I was hoping it would delay our connection too, but just our luck. It was still on time. I guess maybe it was more of an arrival issue than a departure issue. We flew economy and had gotten seats in the back since they were the only ones with an aisle seat. I have bladder issues and either needed to be in the aisle seat or would take the middle seat so I could just crawl over my friend a few times and not a stranger. We only had our backpacks on us and nothing in the overhead compartments, so we decided it was time to book it as soon as they let us start deboarding. We couldn't miss this flight, otherwise the next one would be in about 12 hours, and no food places were open, so it would have been vending machine dinner. And if my checked luggage beat me home, I wouldn't have the medication I packed in there. I know, stupid not to take it in my carry-on, but I hadn't even thought about it since I wouldn't need it until after our planned arrival home. So the plane begins to deboard and we start to stand in the aisle when a man in front of us leans out like he's grabbing something. We waited, but then I realized he wasn't moving. I poked my friend who was in front of me and she asked him to move because we had a short connection. Man, no. Friend, please, we have a connection leaving in like 10 minutes. Man, so do I. Friend, so you get up too and let's go. Man, no, I'm not doing that. My friend has a hotter temper than I do, and since I didn't want to get no-flyed, I swapped spots so I was in front of her. I explained to the guy that we can't miss this flight since our checked luggage has medicine I need for the night and practically begged this guy with my sweetest customer service attitude if we could please sneak past him. He said no again, and his wife next to him was smirking at us like she'd won something by holding us up. I told him that he's allowed to be mad at us for going in front of him and he's allowed to think we're terrible, but he cannot touch us, so I was going to just go past him. I gave him another apology as I took a big step over his leg to get past. He then raised his leg up. I don't know if he meant to just stop me or trip me, but the latter happened and I face-planted in the middle of the airplane aisle. Mind you, I am not a small girl, so not only did I make a loud smack, but I probably also shook the damn plane, which made sure even first class could feel the earthquake that just happened. The guy had completely retreated back into his seat when everyone turned around to see what happened, so it looked even better for me that I just randomly fell on my face. He was just looking at his wife while she was covering her mouth, either trying not to laugh or because she was still in shock from what just happened. It was dead silent while my friend helped me up and another passenger helped me grab something that fell off my bag. I didn't say anything else other than a thank you to the girl who picked up my backpack dangly and just pulled my friend away before she could spit more than just insults at the guy. I know damn well she couldn't have taken him, but that's never stopped her before. I did my best not to look as mortified as I felt as we made our way up the aisle. We asked a few people if we could go in front of them because of our connection, and the only people who said no were the people who had done the same thing to get closer to the front of the plane. My friend wanted to say something to the flight or gate attendant about the guy, but one, we didn't have time for that, and two, I just wanted to go home and was already embarrassed enough. Thankfully, our gate wasn't too far away, and we made it as one of the last 4 people in the boarding line. Meanwhile, I watched the man and his wife book it across the airport to make it to their flight. A spiteful part of me kinda hopes they didn't make it, but we'll never know. As an aside, I completely get if you didn't like the fact that I basically tried to cut in line. I didn't like it either, and out of all 4 flights we'd taken during our trip, I only tried to do it this once. And you're well within your rights to be mad like this guy, but personally, I don't think tripping me was warranted. The next one is an entitled parent story. I'm an attorney, and a few years ago, I prosecuted juvenile delinquency cases at the district attorney office in my state. The sheer number of awful parents I encountered was depressing, but not at all surprising. The deadbeats were frustrating and depressing, but the entitled ones were infuriating. So let me preface all this with something you need to understand to do that job. Kids are stupid. All kids, the smart ones, the dumb ones, the good, the bad, the religious, atheists, mama's boys, cheerleaders, and athletes. And I say this as someone who fully acknowledges that I too was a stupid kid. I once chugged a full bottle of maple syrup because I saw it in a movie. So you have to try and look at more than the crime or their life circumstances, so please keep that in mind. The bane of my existence in that job? Snapchat, because the send nudes culture hits kids right around that 14. 16 range. And I'm sure by now you all know why having a 15-year-old girl send you a nude is problematic. And of course, they have to show their friends or send it to others after breaking up. Well, instead of charging these kids for possessing and distributing CP, I found a statute pertaining to the unauthorized distribution of electronic property and charged that because it technically fit the elements and would keep the kid off the sex offender registry if they moved. The goal was to teach a lesson, hold kids accountable, and make sure they understood that next time I could do it differently. The victims and their parents were also pretty much on board because there were actual consequences, juvenile probation. Plus, I always included the opportunity for the victim to talk about how it affected them in court and required the offending kid to sincerely apologize. Parents of the offending kid were always on board except for one entitled mother, who stopped me after court one day with her son to ask me questions. EM. You're treating my son, who was 15, like a criminal when he's just a kid. Me. I know he's just a kid, and I'm not saying he's a bad kid. But he needs to understand how serious this is, because if he does this when he turns 18, this is a very different conversation. EM. Scoffs. Okay, fine. What are you doing with the girl? What's she being charged with? Me. Blank stare. Excuse me? EM. She did the same thing my son did, right? Why isn't she being charged with anything? Me. Because we don't charge and punish victims of crimes. EM huffs. Well, I don't think she should get off scot-free because she's the one who sent my son the pics that got him in trouble. She's just as guilty as anyone and started all this. Me, trying not to yell right outside the courtroom. Okay. Well, your son sent the pictures to his friends after they broke up and they made their way around the entire school, and this girl has had to suffer through that and everything that comes along with it. Had your son come to you when she sent him the pics and told you about how her sending him nude pics offended his delicate sensibilities, I would have happily treated him like the victim of something and made sure the young lady knew how serious sending nude pictures to underage kids was. But he didn't do that, and we both know why. And the second he decided to take those pictures and send them to everyone, he victimized this young lady. However, if you think she should be held accountable for her actions because what she did was technically a crime, I'm happy to listen. Of course, I'd then have to take a more literal view of what everyone did here. That would likely result in me charging your son with possession and distribution of CP to make sure I held everyone to the same standard of culpability, and you're free to At this point, the kid's attorney said, "Sorry," and whisked them both away, and he ended up pleading at the next hearing and offered a tearful apology once he heard in open court how much he hurt his former GF. Entitled mom remained silent when asked by the judge if there was anything she wanted to say on her son's behalf. Anyway, thank you for watching.